Tonight, President Park Geun-hye replaces close to half of her cabinet ministers, including the finance minister, in her latest attempt to regain public trust after April's ferry tragedy and to kickstart her economic reforms. U.S. President Barack Obama leaves no option off the table to keep Islamic militants from marching on Iraq's capital city. And FIFA World Cup 2014 opens in style with music, passion, J-Lo, and a 3-1 victory for Brazil. We've got it all covered both on and off the football pitch. Early edition begins now.
I see trees of green, red
늘 남편 먼저,
I see them
늘 자식 먼저.
for me and
레이디 퍼스트라는 말을 믿고 살아온 당신. 오늘만큼은 세상 누구보다 당신이 먼저입니다.
한 분 한 분 특별하게 모시겠습니다.
Excellence in Flight, Korean Air.
It is 5 a.m. in New York, noon in Baghdad, and 6 p.m. on Friday, the 13th of June here in Korea. Hello, this is Early Edition at 6, live from Seoul. I'm Moon Gon-young.
And I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for joining us. President Park Geun-hye has carried out a much-anticipated cabinet shakeup, putting the government in full gear for sweeping reforms.
She nominated 7 new ministers out of a total of 17 on this Friday. Our presidential office correspondent Choi Yu-sun has the names of those who will now aid the president throughout the remainder of her term.
As highly expected, President Park has nominated her close aide and former ruling party floor leader Choi Kyung-hwan as finance minister and deputy prime minister. The former bureaucrat's experience in economic policy making and later in parliament were highly valued in the pick, as the president has a 3-year plan to revitalize the local economy. President Park also named Choi Yang-hee, a computer science and engineering professor, as her science and ICT minister. The nominee's career-long contributions to the development of convergence technology and innovative thinking were acknowledged in his nomination. For new education minister and second deputy prime minister Kim Myung-soo, the president of the Korean Educational Research Association was named. He is expected to play a key role in reforming the country's education system. Chung Jong-sop was nominated to replace Security Minister Kang Byung-gyu, who came under fire for the government's lax management of April's ferry accident. As our culture minister, President Park named Chung Sung-gun the president of Arirang TV and Radio. The presidential office spoke highly of the former journalist's excellent communication skills and understanding of the president's administrative philosophy. Lee Ki-kwan, the former vice labor minister, was nominated to head the same ministry. To replace gender equality minister Cho Yoon-sun, who was named the presidential secretary this week, ruling party lawmaker Kim Hee-jung was nominated. As for the maritime minister, who had offered to resign after the Sewol-ho ferry accident recovery ends, the presidential office said he will stay put for now. By naming her close aides into the cabinet and the presidential office, it's expected that President Park will further secure her authority in running state affairs. Her office says that there will be no other nominations until the government restructuring bill to establish a safety ministry passes parliament. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
And of course, the nation's rival political parties, as you might imagine, had very different reactions to today's cabinet reshuffle. The ruling Saenuri Party welcomed the news, saying the nominations reflect the president's commitment toward reforming the government and the economy.
As for the timing of the shakeup, which came before the president's nominee for prime minister had been confirmed by the parliament, the ruling party said it hopes the opposition understands that no further time could be wasted. The opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy, however, was not quite so understanding. They said the reshuffle violated the nation's constitution, which states the prime minister must recommend cabinet ministers to the president.
And if confirmed by the National Assembly, President Park Geun-hye's pick to be her new finance minister will have to hit the ground running.
On top of getting the administration's 3-year economic innovation plan on track, nominee Choi Kyung-hwan will also be expected to bolster an unsteady economic recovery and boost sluggish domestic consumption. Shin Se-min has more.
Newly nominated Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan, if approved, will enter office faced with the burden of a number of assignments. The 3-term lawmaker will be expected to set the nation's economy steadily on the path to recovery at a time when the finance ministry has been accused of not being proactive enough in carrying out reforms. In a brief face-to-face with the reporters, the nominee said he would place a premium on successfully carrying out the Park administration's 3-year economic innovation plan announced in February. It's a plan that calls for reforming the regulatory system, overhauling debt-ridden public enterprises, and boosting domestic consumption, which is suffering from a prolonged slump. There were signs of sluggishness even before April's ferry disaster, which has had a pronounced impact on people's spending habits. Choi, a former bureaucrat, is known for his extensive experience and knowledge of economic policies and affairs. Experts say this will serve him well in his new role. They add that his close ties with President Park also stands to help him forge ahead with policy changes, which in recent weeks have been obstructed by varying opinions among government agencies and a lack of cooperation from the National Assembly. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's chief nuclear envoy Hwang Jun-guk travels to Moscow Monday for talks with his Russian counterpart Igor Morgulov. The 3-day trip will be Hwang's first visit to Russia since taking office in April and comes just days after talks with his U.S. and Chinese counterparts. The two officials are expected to focus on setting the conditions for restarting the 6-party nuclear talks, which, of course, has been at a standstill since December 2008. The multilateral dialogue aimed at denuclearizing Pyongyang involves the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia. Seoul is expected to ask Moscow to help convince Pyongyang to show sincerity about dismantling its nuclear program before resuming the talks. Now, over in Washington, the U.S. government is going to replace its point man on North Korea, Glenn Davies, as Washington's push to denuclearize North Korea has really made a little progress. Multiple diplomatic sources in Washington say the outgoing U.S. ambassador to South Korea, Sang Kim, is being considered to fill Davies' positions, and Davies was appointed to the post for representing the communist regime in January of 2012, but he failed to convince North Korea to stop nuclear tests and long-range missile launches as Pyongyang really fired a rocket in April of the same year. The Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian Pacific Affairs will most likely be made U.S. ambassador to Thailand.
The de facto maritime border dividing the two Koreas in the West Sea has become one of the most contentious areas in a conflict that has been bubbling for more than 6 decades now. And with North Korea continuing on with its provocations near the Northern Limit Line, or the NLL, South Korea has announced plans to build a new naval base in the region by the end of this year. Kim Hyun-bin tells us more.
The South Korean military plans to finish construction of a naval base on one of its Western Sea border islands by the end of this year to better cope with North Korea's naval provocations. A South Korean naval officer said Friday that the base will be located on Baekneung-do Island, just 10 kilometers south of the de facto maritime border separating the two Koreas. Upon completion, the base will house a 570-ton guided missile patrol killer, or PKG, and a 170-ton patrol killer medium vessel, or PKM, and will accommodate up to 100 personnel. The total cost of the base is expected to come in at roughly $42 million. It's money being spent to counter the North Korea threat and prevent another provocation in an area that has become one of the most contentious on the Korean peninsula. In March of 2010, the North torpedoed South Korean warship in the area, killing 46 sailors. 8 months later, the North shelled Yeonpyeong Island, killing 4 people, including 2 civilians. In the years since, North Korea has continued to provoke its southern neighbor through naval exercises and firing off artillery that has landed south of the maritime border. In 2012, the communist regime constructed a naval base directly across from Baekneung-do Island, capable of holding 70 hovercrafts. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
The global community seeks ways to end wartime sexual abuses, and Korea is highlighting the need for Japan to take responsibility for forcing hundreds of thousands of women into sexual slavery in the early 20th century. Speaking at an international forum on wartime sexual violence, a senior Korean diplomat said Japan's recognition of its past could prevent future cases of mass rape during times of war. Our Connie Kim reports.
The Korean government is stepping up its diplomatic campaign to press Japan to repent and compensate for the women it forced into sexual slavery during World War II. Speaking at the Ending Sexual Violence and Conflict Summit in London on Thursday, Korea's second Vice Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol said Japan's horrific crime should never be repeated and swift action needed to be taken for the sake of the victims.
The Japanese government needs to acknowledge its responsibility for the comfort women issue, make an official apology, and take responsible measures in order to prevent such tragedy from happening again.
The minister emphasized that Tokyo recognizing its past wrongdoings and taking action are needed to move forward.
We will not be able to construct a sexual violence-free world if there is no repent, apology, and probe into past crimes.
An estimated 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were used as sex slaves by the Japanese military during the war. However, Tokyo claims that the issue was settled through a 1965 treaty that normalized the two countries' diplomatic ties. The London gathering, the largest of its kind, hopes to find ways to bring an end to war-zone rape in parts of Africa and the Middle East. Bringing together more than 100 countries, the four-day conference hopes to come up with practical measures to prevent wartime sexual violence and expand international support for the victims. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life, talking with you on air and online, connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gon-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
Many eyes are on Iraq these days. We're now hearing that Iran will help Iraq fight off the Sunni insurgency that has its sights set on Baghdad. And this as U.S. President Barack Obama says the turmoil there demands immediate help. Here's Connie Lee with the report.
The U.S. may be getting involved in Iraq once again. With Islamist militants gaining ground in Iraq, U.S. President Barack Obama said he isn't ruling out U.S. action in the country.
I don't rule out anything because we do have a stake in making sure that these jihadists are not getting a permanent foothold in either Iraq or Syria, for that matter.
Speaking to reporters at the White House with Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott on Thursday, President Obama said the U.S. is looking at all the options to help the country.
I think it's fair to say that in our consultations with the Iraqis, there will be some short-term, immediate things that need to be done militarily. And our national security team is looking at all the options.
Iraq seems to be collapsing under the weight of Sunni Islamist militants called the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, or the ISIL. The offshoot terrorist group of al-Qaeda is surging through Iraq, seizing several towns and cities, and is now threatening to take the capital, Baghdad. Video released Thursday shows a victory parade of the fighters, clad in black, parading through the seized city of Mosul, Iraq's second largest city. The rebels, displaying the black flag of the ISIL, want to create an Islamic state across Sunni areas in Iraq and also in Syria. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
And the recent developments in Iraq have caused oil prices to spike to a 9-month high due to concerns over global supplies. Brent crude futures have risen 3% to more than $113 per barrel, while U.S. crude has gone up 2% to more than $106. Iraq is the second largest oil producing among the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, and the jitters over Iraq have also spilled into global stock markets. Shares in the U.S. fell on Thursday, and major indices across Asia went down in trading Friday. And Korean markets were no exception. As you can see, the benchmark Kospi dropped more than 1% to close at 1990 as foreign investors dropped their shares.
Nearly 1 decade after launching negotiations, Korea and Canada have finally initialed a free trade agreement. It's expected to be sealed before the year is up and go into effect next year. Our Park Geun-hye reports.
Korea is getting a step closer to expanding its free trade bloc. Seoul's trade ministry said Friday that the nation had initialed a free trade agreement with Canada. The two countries promised to do the official signing in the second half of this year, and if all goes well and the two nations' parliaments sign off, the bilateral trade pact is expected to take effect in 2015. Over the next 10 years, each side will get rid of tariffs on nearly 98% of traded goods. And while Korea's manufacturing sector is expected to get a boost from the trade pact, the local farming industry, especially those doing business in livestock products, may take a hit. Canada will lift all of its current 6% tariffs within 2 years on Korean automobiles that make up more than 40% of Korea's exports to the North American country. The Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency says Canada's abundance of natural resources, such as oil and natural gas, will be a boon for Korean exports of equipment associated with developing those resources. However, import tariffs of up to 72% on Canadian beef will also be gradually lifted over a 15-year period. Canada is Korea's 25th largest trading partner, with the bilateral trade volume standing at almost $10 billion. If and when the deal goes into effect next year, Canada will become Korea's 12th FTA partner. Hwang Ji, Arirang News.
Foreign currency deposits in Korean banks hit a record high for the second straight month in May. The Bank of Korea said Friday that foreign exchange deposits of residents in Korea stood at almost $60 billion as of the end of last month, up $1.2 billion from a month earlier. The central bank attributed the rise to a spike in Chinese yuan deposits as investors sought the currency out for its higher yield. Residents include local citizens, foreigners, and foreign companies who have stayed in the country for more than 6 months.
Well, on to quite an interesting news here. Coming off the highly successful film Neighbors, Seth Rogen is already back with a trailer for his next movie, The Interview. And interesting in it, he and James Franco run a popular tabloid site and are looking to be taken seriously. And their opportunity for the interview of a lifetime comes when they're chosen to talk with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, who is a big fan of their site.
Well, the teaser for the first ever American movie dealing with the North Korean leader begins with the words, "You are entering into the most dangerous country on earth." Now, despite those ominous words, it's clear from the interview's 1.5-minute trailer that the movie is hardly sinister in nature. The action comedy centers around how a talk show host and his producer embarks on a CIA mission to assassinate Kim Jong-un, a mission they are clearly not cut out for. Kim Jong-un is portrayed in the film by Korean-American actor Randall Park.
Well, the movie will hit big screens in the U.S. in October, but still no word yet on whether it will be released in South Korea. It seems a little bit like similar to The Dictator that we had a few years back, right?
Right. We also had an American movie featuring an assassination attempt by an American elite squad to get rid of Kim Jong-il.
Who is Kim Jong-un's father, right?
Father. And then it did not open in Korea, so I'm assuming the same fate might await this movie. But toilet humor is good, but I've seen the works with Seth Rogen and James Franco and other leave your brains at home type of movie, which was This Is the End. Not really impressed, so.
Well, the Neighbors did well, right?
Right.
Right, so we'll have to wait and see, and I'm actually looking forward to this film. And it's time now to recap the week's domestic headlines.
Our Yurian is here with us.
Thank you very much for that. The 2014 World Cup has been hogging the headlines here in Korea as well. Now, 중앙일보 headline reads from 1954 to 2014. World Cup, a chance for hope. Now, the photo right below is actually a photo that dates back to the night just before the 1954 World Cup when Korea beat Japan 5-1 in the Asian preliminaries. This was when Korea was struggling to recover from the Korean War, and the article notes that when Korea beat Japan, the very country that colonized and ruled Korea, the Korean people were given fresh hope. Now, the paper compares the hard times back in the 50s to Korea of today, when the country is reeling from the April ferry disaster that's left more than 300 people dead or missing. Now, the paper cites an expert who says the World Cup could be a chance to uplift the country's low spirits. Now, staying with the World Cup, but looking at some state-of-the-art technology. A 조선일보 headline here reads, Germany's tank corps grows stronger with big data. Now, the tank corps is actually how Koreans refer to a Germany soccer team. Now, the blue 4 dots seen here, 2 on the shoulder and 2 on the knees, indicate where the sensors are attached to collect data on the player, such as velocity, the heart rate, and also the direction of shooting by the minute. Now, as you can see, all the data is being sent to a central server, which is where it is analyzed, then sent to the coach's tablet PC. The coach then came up with proper training methods and tactics, and even calculated the chance of a specific player making a successful pass or goal. Now, it's been exactly 59 days since the tragic Seoul ferry disaster, and still the tragic stories continue to break our hearts. Now, the title of this story, with a headline that says, "A mom, dad, brother all dead, a 7-year-old youngest son represents mourning family." Now, you see on the right here the photo of the family of the 4, and like the headline says, the boy is actually the only remaining survivor. And also the photo below, taken by a survivor, shows his mother holding onto a life jacket inside the ferry during the time of the accident. She reportedly asked the crewmen to make an announcement about finding her youngest son, and only when she heard that he was safely rescued out of the ferry did she put on the life jacket. Her body was found in the sunken ferry days after the accident. The bodies of the boy's older brother and father were found drifting in waters around the site of accident days and weeks later. Now, the 7-year-old boy stands alone at the mortuary with his uncle seen in the photo here. And I'll leave it at that for this week's look at stories from the Korean dailies.
And the 2014 World Cup officially kicked off in Brazil with the opening ceremony and the first match on Thursday or dawn on Friday morning here in Korea.
Our Song Ji-sun tells us more about last night's game and what's in store for the next round.
The opening ceremony epitomized the beauty and passion of the South American country. The theme of the performance was nature, the people, and the sport itself. And for the finale, the ball and center split into a stage for pop singers Pitbull and Jennifer Lopez, who sang the official song, "We Are One." In the opening match, the first goal of this year's World Cup came from the home team, but it was an own goal by Marcelo on the 11th minute. Brazilian playmaker Neymar equalized soon after, though, and he slotted home a controversially awarded penalty in the second half to give Brazil the lead. Oscar secured the victory with a long-range shot near the end to make it 3-1. 3 games are in the lineup for this Friday, or early Saturday, Korea time. Starting with Group A, Mexico kicks off the first game versus Cameroon at 1 p.m. in the city of Natal. That will be 1 a.m. on a Saturday morning here in Seoul. And we have the Group B match, one of the most anticipated between Spain and the Netherlands. They made in the final back in South Africa 4 years ago, with the Spaniards coming out on top and picking up the trophy for the first time. Chile, another strong shot from the continent, will go against Australia at 6 p.m. at Guyaba, the same venue at which Korea will play their first match. 송지선, Arirang News.
And for Koreans, the World Cup would be incomplete without the huge mass in red t-shirts shouting on the streets here in Korea.
The Red Devils, the name given to supporters of Korea's football team, have announced that they will cheer for the footballers at Gwanghwamun Square for the group matches instead of Seoul Plaza in front of City Hall. Seeing tens of thousands of people gathered at Seoul Plaza has been a signature of Korea's football fever, but that has been made impossible, as there's currently a memorial altar set up there for the Seoul ferry disaster victims.
Right. And of course, the 2014 Brazil World Cup is on, and while all eyes are on the field, we'll also be looking to the skies, as weather can be a huge factor in that. Let's get a check on the weather in Brazil by turning to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle, how is it looking like there?
Good evening. Mother Nature couldn't have provided a better environment for the opener of the World Cup, and the weather was just right.
Will the favorable conditions continue for tomorrow's game?
Yes and no. The games will be held in 3 different cities on Saturday, which is tomorrow. In Brazil, cloudy days are forecast in Cuiabá and Sao Paulo, with temperatures at 31 and 26 degrees, although we are expecting light rain over in Porto Alegre. Speaking of rain, we've had quite a amount here in Korea in recent days, but our weekend looks very bright with no rain in the forecast, and the daytime highs are going back up into the low 30s in some regions. Now going over to our temperature readings, Seoul will top out at 18 and 29 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will peak up to 31 and 25 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops out at 26, Dokdo at 23, while Mangkungang tops out at 29. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and back to you guys.
Thanks, Michelle. That brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for watching. For our viewers in Korea, wonderful rest of the evening. This has been Daniel Choi.
And I'm Moon Geun-hye, and we hope to see you right back here, same time, Monday evening. Bye-bye.